Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.
Welcome to Werewolf the Podcast. This is episode 155. Yeah, I got it wrong last time. I said it was 155 last time. It's 155 this time, so I'm sorry about that. We're carrying on with the story. We're on part lots because there's lots of parts to this story. So go back to Negging the Nixies, August last year, and follow us through that. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us in X, or you can find us on TikTok. You can find us in all these places, and we'd really like to speak to you. So go into the description and join the Facebook group, or do some shit like that. Oh, and follow us and share us if you give a shit. Bye. I'm not gonna go into the details about the last few episodes. I'm sorry. There's 30 of them in this particular story, so there would be a lot for me to go over. So let's just begin. We're having, an issue, some vampire blood-sucking gods who have it in for us. Who are we? Alright, okay. We are Fen, the wolf soul, the professor, and me. The professor is a 13th century knight who back in his day was a bit of a dick to certain sectors of the community. He was called, Simon de Montfort, I suppose, and he was an earl in his time, and stuff. I suppose he still is. To escape the wrath of hell for his things he did, he went to find the Holy Grail, and after drinking from it, got a job from God. Yeah, got a job from God. He basically had to make up for a lot of his sins. I believe it's called penance. His job was to protect the supernatural beings of this world as well as the human race. Yeah, not a small task. I agree. Fen, he's a giant wolf soul from a few thousand years ago. His wolf pack gave their souls to a tribe of humans when both tribe and pack were on their way out in a particularly shitty winter. The souls bonded with the humans and made them into werewolves and wolves at choice. He spends most of his time somewhat ghost-like. He doesn't have one of those physical body things and is invisible to the non-magical beings around him. I am Will, and I can proudly say I am a psychopath. No, this is not an intervention, you know, I like being a psychopath. A psychopathic werewolf is a wonderful thing, and I'm particularly good at it. We've been sort of captured by two 8,000-year-old gods, blood gods Samarat and her son. Both are a bit pissed at me. Sammy for murdering her brother, who was also her lover, and her son is pissed as well because, he is like super powerful but a bit thick, you know. He's pissed off with me for killing his uncle and his fucking dad. Weird, eh? But they like to keep it in the family, and they had in fact shortened their gene pool with the birth of the son. Oh, and in the last episode, the jinn, Bosworth, had arrived on the scene. He's a genie and has made the professor's day as gin, and the alcoholic drink, gin, get it? Gin and gin sound almost the same. Yeah, the last 5,000 word episode was an entire build-up to that joke. I know it's sad, but do you know what? We really enjoyed it. So, yeah, I think that's where we are, and I've kind of nailed it in less than 400 words. Phew. Bosworth had been in a flask that the devil had given the professor. Lucifer had strapped flasks on the back of the professor's shield, and he now managed to get the cognac, the vodka, and the whiskey off its back. Then, in the fourth flask, the gin had appeared. It had appeared from it. Do you get it? Gin.
Gin! Get it? Gin!
There was a moment of hesitation before anything else happened. Even the robe of Bosworth, the neon pink robe full of shadow, seemed to be staring at him in fascination. The gods seemed to be staring at him in fascination. I was staring at him in fascination. It was really fascinating.
The professor. Well, This bunch had no sense of humour, did they? Or maybe it was my exhaustion that had sent me over the edge a little. I mean, it was bloody funny. A jinn's a spirit too. But I didn't raise this new angle of comedic wealth as I saw that no one else was getting any kind of a laugh from what I was saying. Will had become the man and the soul. He sat looking at the spiritual standoff between the genie and the gods. The jinn was floating back and forth and seemed to be weighing up the bloody vamps. The gold-armoured arseholes had weapons in hand, and they were definitely not taking Bosworth lightly. In fact, the goddess was now helmetless, and her eyes now could be seen to be full of concern.
What the fuck is going on?
Asked Will, without taking his eyes off the scene before us. I was partially through a sip of the cognac. It was fine stuff, and I may have imbibed a little more than I intended at that point, although I think it was a valid thing to do, given the situation. You see, this is... This is bloody interesting. I took another mouthful before offering the flask to Will. He took it and gulped down a fair portion without taking his eyes off what was happening before us. You see, it was Bosworth and co. that were the ones responsible for bringing the blood gods to heel last time. I waved at Will to pass back the flask, which he did, and I took another long draught of the alcoholic pleasure. That is rather good. I'm not so up on my cognacs, I must admit, but that is the finest I've ever tasted. I wonder what it is, I said, staring at the small flask. By all rights, it should have been empty by now, but it wasn't. I shook it. It was still full. Oh, how I loved that Lucifer right now. It was a bit worrying that she knew my wants and needs as well as she did. I'd lost my thread, and Will was staring at me now with a look of inquiry in his eyes. Oh, sorry, old chap. Just a momentary lack of focus, I told him. Yes, the population had been under the sway of the blood gods for some 4,000 years or so, since Babylon and all that, probably before, in fact. There are no real records to show how long they ruled over the population of humans, but they were making them utterly miserable with their respective behavior, I explained. I took another swipe at the flask. Have you ever tasted brandy as good as this before? I've always found it quite bitter, but this is...
Their behaviour,
butted in the werewolf. Oh yes, sorry. Here, try this. The whiskey must be remarkable too, if this is the standard that Lucifer keeps in her collection. I threw him the flask. He caught it and looked back in disbelief. The jinn and the vampires were still posturing, as were the Valkans, the giant bloodlords. Sammy's bodyguards stepped up. Each had the body of a man, well, the body of a 12-foot-tall steroid monkey, and the head of a creature. One was a lion, one was an ibis, and one was an antelope. See them? God, that's bloody good stuff, that, isn't it? These was not as powerful as I thought they was going to be. I mean, I bloody ruined them, didn't I? Stabbed them all up and everything. Will was looking at me strangely now.
The story?
The jinn suddenly turned towards us, and with a rather complicated movement of his robes, he drew a ring of pink around us. I saluted the neon pink spirit. Pink gin! I laughed. Pink gin, Will! Have you ever had it? The flames rose around us, forming a barrier we could see. The tips of the fire came together and touched above our heads. A dome was formed over us. A dome of sparkling neon pink.
Huh? What did he just do that for?
Asked Will. It's a protective, doofer, I told him. Then took another drink of the fine cognac. I was looking for the bottom of this flask, but it was a long way down.
Okay.
Will replied as though this made it all okay. He looked at the flask he held and unscrewed the lid.
Well, do you know what? If you're going to get wankered, then so am I,
he said, as he tilted the flask above his mouth and quaffed the whiskey. It was a proper quaff, too. You know, it ran over his face and stuff. He wiped his face with the back of his arm and sighed deeply.
Cheers,
he said, upending the flask in a rousing manner.
Well, I have to say that in your own words, that was utterly marvellous,
he told me. Outside the dome, the air was boiling as power surged around it. I could see it as heat waves. I could see the air roiled with lightning and electrical static. I could see the world fighting the magical build-up and losing. The people of the time had become bloody hopeless. They were food and fodder for the slave lifestyle the blood gods had placed upon them. Bloody blood god bastards. Everything was about sacrifice. Firstborn child was given to Sammy and she'd bloody eat them as a sign of love for the parents or something. Bloody barbaric, if you ask me. Not cricket at all, I told Will, sealing the cognac flask and managing to grasp the vodka flask only on my third attempt. Then Bosworth appeared on the scene, you see, as one of those messianic fellows who turn up now and again. You know, like what's-his-face, the carpenter chap. Jesus, that's him. And Buddha and things. He managed to focus the population's hopes and dreams on himself, you see. You see? I hiccuped. Sorry, where was I? Oh, yeah, he couldn't have been called Bosworth back then, could he? I mean, Bosworth doesn't sound like a Mesopotamian name, does it? Well, maybe it is. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. Perhaps I'm being stereotypical. Life is such a rich tapestry after all, isn't it?
Then what happened?
Asked Will. He was now invested in getting as drunk as me, so I noticed him affixed to the never-ending whiskey flask, much like a hungry newborn, fixed to the nipple. Oh, he trapped him, see, for all eternity, I simply stated. Flashes and explosions were happening outside our little bubble of safety now. I was still sufficiently sober to thank God that I was not outside this dome. But I would have to work on that sobriety, because I had an idea that I would need to get out of here. More vodka, please.
So, how'd they get out?
Asked Will. What was that? I asked.
Well, they obviously got out,
he said, pointing to the scene outside the barrier. Don't really know, to be frank. Probably due to some tosser archaeologist breaking some kind of seal or other. Always tends to be that way. What are humans like? Big sign saying, do not break the seal or it'll be the end of the world as we know it. Do not enter this area or else everybody will die, you know. Don't push the big red button. I paused to take another drink. What do bloody humans do? They push the big red button, they break the seal, it's a fucking cave, I said with some evident display of exasperation. Sometimes I really would like a word with these explorer folks. I really would. Massive explosions now rocked the dome. Flashes of colour. The giant ibis bloke was blown from his weird birdie feet and tumbled off behind the gods who braced themselves against the tumult Bosworth was creating. It did not look like the two of them had entered the game yet. What was it? Were they expecting our Bosworth to shoot his load on the first attempt? Oh, God, I'm sorry for the image that was formed there. Ugh. Fen, as we drank, circled the safe zone and tried to step out. He could not. He looked quite perplexed by this, if you could read his body language as a perplexed wolf. I could see that he was undoubtedly perplexed.
Can we kill him then?
Will asked. I do not know, to be honest. I slurred. We find that there's always one way to kill them, though. I mean, thingies and whatevers. But it's finding the thing that's the difficult, thingy.
Oh, yeah, I get it. You mean like killing werewolf souls? I've found a spell in Wales on how to kill them, Yeah, I did. It just turns out all you have to do is take the canines out of them and crush them. It's so simple. You just take canines out of the human or werewolf, and then you crushes them right up, and that just kills the werewolf soul. Dead? Is it dead? I don't know, but it's gone. Do you know what I mean?
He told me this as he thought it meant nothing. Fuck. I don't swear often, but what Will had just told me sobered me instantly. Why the hell had he told me that? Why? He just told me how to kill him and Fen. I now knew. Did he not realize the power that he'd just given me? I now knew how to destroy him. Part of me reveled in the knowing. I knew that I'd have a very difficult decision to make in the future, and he'd just given me the answer. Did he trust me that much? I felt horrible and elated at the same time. He just sat there smiling, thinking that he understood how these things worked. I turned my head from him. I spat, and I looked at the man again. For fuck's sake, Will! I was so angry at him for giving me this power over him. I mean, it was a huge compliment that he could share this with me. I knew this man was not stupid, so he wouldn't have blurted this out accidentally. He genuinely thought he could trust me. Fuck. Because he really could not.
What's fucking wrong with you?
Will asked. For fuck's sake, Will, I repeated. He'd given me an answer that at this moment I did not want. So I lied. I hate to admit it, but I lied to the man. Bosworth's not getting the best of it, is he? Look, we need to do something. I pointed to the war outside the bubble. Strands of lightning were coming from the robe's arms. They flickered and rippled over the giant bodyguards of the blood gods. But this was a distraction that we could take from Bosworth if I could get out there. I would take on the bodyguards, while he fought the real monsters. It was time to use the ace card I had up my sleeve. My immortality. By using my immortality, I mean I would come back when killed. We could use this rematerialization to get me outside this site of safety. I must be a bit deranged after all. I was going to step outside the circle of protection to fight the monsters again. I could engage the giants while Bosworth engaged the vampire gods. Deranged and stupid. I couldn't die, but as mentioned in an earlier episode, it didn't mean the process of death was pleasant in any way. Having your head ripped off or being hacked to pieces is not nice. In fact, it's downright horrendous to all except those with the most extreme of kinks. I know this is not a palatable thing to ask you, Will, I told the man, passing him my poignard dagger from my belt. He took it, looking slightly confused at the direction of the conversation. We are friends, and it will be difficult for you to do what I request. But I need you to do it so that I can get out there and help him, I said, pointing to the purple, now tattered robe, fluttering on winds of unknown speed. Flashes of power and light smashed against the jinn as he was attacked by the gods and the bodyguards. So before you argue, you need to... The man slammed the poignard hilt deep into my left temple. A flash of darkness, and I was now standing behind him. Jesus, Will! Jesus! That was worryingly easy for you, was it not, old chap? I thought it might play on your conscience for a moment and you might find it difficult to do, but oh no, straight in the bloody head. If you let me finish the sentence, I would have asked you to do it close to the supernatural force field thing, so I actually ended up outside it and not still in here. A bit stab happy, aren't we? What? The man looked slightly embarrassed before shrugging. I was still in a state of disbelief at how easily that had come to him as I kept my eye on the man and wandered to the wall of pink light, shaking my head. Right. I raised my hands into a guard of sorts. Please let me finish my sentence before you get all stab-happy and kill me again, won't you? He nodded and looked a little contrite for his actions. If you stand with your back to the wall, I will reassert myself behind you, and therefore outside the bubble. He moved in front of me as I faced him and the barrier. I still can't bloody believe how easy that was for you to do. Honestly. Little dagger-happy werewolf Will and all that. I shook my head and got myself prepared. I was almost ready to drop my hands and nod for him to proceed. Then, there was a giggle from behind me. Of course she was there. Of course she was. Lucifer was sitting on a leather sofa that now took up most of the bubble. It was blood-red, shiny leather that looked like it had been stolen from some stately home or another. Well, it looked stolen. I know. How does something look stolen? Well, you'll just have to take my word for it. It did. She was laid back, watching us, but she didn't look her usual self. She had a white, fluffy dressing gown on that had seen better days by the look of it. It could have done with a wash, too, to be honest. I'm sure I could have worked out what the stains were on the front of it if I'd had time. Her hair was in a towel, piled on her head as though she'd just gotten out of the shower, and her face was hidden by some sort of cold cream or beauty regime mask. I couldn't tell which. Her bare feet were in slippers that matched her robe, and in her lap was a bucket of popcorn that she dipped in and out of, munching as she watched us. It was as if she thought that she was invisible to our eyes. Will wondered what I was looking at and looked around me to see her too. It was only at this point that Lucy realized that we both could see her. Popcorn rained from her hand and her mouth. There was a moment of distinct shock as she realized her visibility and her state of dress as she checked herself over.
Oh, bloody genie magic!
She yelled. Then, with a flash, the most beautiful young woman you can ever imagine suddenly appeared. Go on, imagine it. Even if women are not your thing, you have an image of the feminine form that sits in your brain. Now come on, you can do better than that. There you go, that's more like it. It's not my taste, but it's okay. I mean, I can see what you've got there and it's very nice. That image sat there now, pretending nothing of what had happened, and giving off an air of, don't mention anything of the last few moments, you didn't see me. The popcorn was gone, and wine was in a crystal glass in her perfectly manicured hand. She smiled that smile that many had willingly died for and given their most precious gift, their very living soul. I stepped towards her. You having a good time, then?
Oh, yes, Simon. Oh, how was the gin?
She laughed. It was utterly charming. The anger I held for her disappeared at this reminder of the joke. Well, yes. An utterly superb spirit I found, I said, offering her a genuine, warm smile. Thank you for that, Lucy. Thank you, I told her. I'd love to chat, old girl, but I do need to go out there and help Bozzy. He seems like he's facing somewhat of an unfair odds.
Oh, don't let me get in the way. I'm here to drink my wine and watch in that order.
I went back to facing Will, his back to the bubble. I smiled at him and nodded. And then He stabbed me.
Will, so the professor died, and as I turned, he walked away from the wall of the bubble, staggering slightly against the swirling maelstrom. He was looking splendid in his black armour. The helmet had somehow returned, as had the sword and the shield. It took me quite a while to notice that the dagger, the poignard that should have been in my hand was no longer in there. Must have got it back, mustn't he? I watched him force his way forward. He had no chance against the monsters out there, and I was so angry that I couldn't be out there with him.
You want to help him?
The woman asked me. I initially ignored her, watching Bosworth start to push back the bodyguards and Simon just stride towards him. It took a while for me to be able to swallow all my pride and ask for help, which is exactly what she fucking wanted. Could you help him? I asked.
What was that?
I had my back turned to her, so I slowly turned to meet her eyes as she leant purposefully forward in her seat, straightening her skirts and holding a look of delight on her face. Could you help him? She sat back in a huff of disappointment.
You forgot the magic word.
She mocked me. Inside, I was being fucking ripped apart, as was she being ripped apart in my mind's eye. In my imagination, I was taking my anger out on her body, worrying and ripping it as she screamed.
Ooh,
She visibly shivered.
you give me goosebumps.
She smirked. I forgot that she could see inside my head and read my fucking thoughts. The rage inside was growing, and it was getting on for nothing I could remember. But I had to help. I had to help my friend. She patted the seat next to her in the most condescending manner that she ever could, and invited me to sit. I turned away. I had to. I just had to turn away. Fen was fucking fighting me. All I wanted to do was become the werewolf. All I wanted to do was rip and tear. This pain was fucking real. I took a stone from the floor and hefted it in my hand. It was lovely and weighty, and I smiled, trying to keep my mind blank. I turned towards the woman seated on the couch and smiled. Huh, there it was. She froze for just a micro moment, which was enough for me to realise that she wasn't as in charge of this situation as she thought she was. This really helped, as I realised this situation and me being this angry was just it was just fucking silly, and what she wanted could be readily dismissed by, well, you know, what we do, taking the piss out of it. I turned and threw the stone with all my might at the wall of the dome, laughing. I sat back up. What the fuck had happened? The woman was standing over me, and she was going in and out of focus.
Well, that was bloody stupid, wasn't it?
She told me in the most disapproving manner.
Did you not think? I know you're angry, but did you not think that rock you hurled was going to bounce back from the wall of protection? Although, it was hilarious. I need to get a YouTube channel for all the wacky and stupid things that I see.
She laughed.
How's the head?
I sat up. My head was clear enough. I don't think I was injured, but I was fucking embarrassed. Could you please help him? I asked her. She laughed and bowed her thanks before placing her right index finger on her perfect rosebud lips.
Now, what was it you said before? Ah, that was it. You asked if I would supply demon soldiers.
The ibis-headed vampire lord was suddenly surrounded by 5 creatures. They had many heads and limbs and weapons and were all about 10 feet tall. Just use your imagination to mix the strangest aspects of all the animals of the world together and then add just, some more weird shit. And those 5 creatures were that. I know, again, I'm being a bit lazy and not describing things like, Lucifer and the demons, but you guys can do so much better than me, to be honest. I've spoken to you on the fucking Facebook group. Yeah, I know how you guys think. Just go for it. Make them as horrible as possible. Oh, in fact, if you want to message me and tell me your descriptions of Lucy, only out of interest and connection with the podcast's lovely lunatic listeners, not for a sense of personal gratification, of course. I would, enjoy reading them, I think. Sorry. The demons fell on the giant bird-headed bastard and ripped it to pieces as we watched. It was a short and brutal fight. Well, it wasn't really a fight, to be honest. It was just simple fucking butchery. Once finished, the demons turned to the dome and sort of waved in a sort of weirdly pleasant way, as though they was, saying goodbye to friends, and then disappeared in like little butts of mist. It was weird. It was very weird. Yeah. Was very weird. A patch of blood, body parts and gristle was all that remained of the ibis-headed bodyguard. However, they'd left the giant wishbone whole, which I felt was a chance to, maybe fulfill a big wish.
Hellfire next, was it not?
Asked Lucifer. I kind of simply nodded and looked out to see what the fuck was going to happen next. The demon soldier things had been, well, I use a word too much, but cool. Cool as fuck. Simon, who was now engaged with the antelope-headed giant, suddenly was enveloped in flame. At first I thought the fire was killing him, but then I realised that wherever the monster was touched by Simon with sword or shield, flames leapt onto its screaming form. Then above all the tumultuous noise, a shout was heard, and Lucy and I laughed in response.
There you go, you giggly Van Stock Bristolian Rusk, or whatever you're called. Yeah. Your brother was a prick too. Couldn't win a game of darts to save his bloody life. The utter tosser. Still owes me 20 quid, the bastard. Here's an ugly fucker too. You must be twins.
With another couple of flourishes from Simon, the bodyguard was a pillar now. A standing pillar of roaring flame that then suddenly fell to the floor like a downed tree. He was incandescent and beautiful to see. He was in agony. It rolled around until it was brought to stillness by the precise placement of a sword in its throat. Simon stood over it. He was like a black silhouette in a column of flame. I'd thought his armour was fucking cool before, but now it was like, really cool because it was on fire as well. I suppose it wasn't cool if it was on fire though, it was hot. But you get the idea, aren't you?
Oh, and this is going to be the best,
she said as she looked deep into my eyes.
I wish I had your imagination, Will.
She laughed. She looked out, a face of joy and intrigue, and clicked her fingers. The ground became covered in thousands of little fluffy bodies. They were everywhere and just flooded across the floor. The sea of fluffy things lapped at the base of the dome, and only upon close investigation did I see that it was made up, of course, of kittens. A tiny white Persian kitten with big blue eyes met my gaze with, do you know, that cat's kind of confidence. It was so cute it made my little black heart skip a beat. That was until it leapt at the barrier, baring its claws. They were outstretched and were just really big fucking claws. They were not of a congruent size to the wee beastie, and when it went to bite me, its mouth was, well, it was bigger and wider than its fucking head and had rows of teeth in it like those of a shark. As it struck the dome at neck height, I must admit I kind of reeled back. I was a bit scared, and it slid down the dome, confused and scrambling and trying to claw at the pink wall of fire. When it reached the bottom, it just resumed being a really cute kitten, but now with really sad eyes. "What the fuck are those?" I shouted.
Kittens of doom!
Laughed Lucifer. The kittens now poured towards the lion-headed monster, and as they got to his feet, he just looked down a bit, perplexed and a bit confused, and just started to sweep his spear through them, but to no effect. And then the kittens were on him. They ran up his legs and coated him as he flapped around, screaming and slapping at the surface of his body, trying to dislodge him. He was trying to rub him away. The coating of kittens just got thicker and thicker as more poured over him, though. The monster then was suddenly disappeared. He was gone. He was under the tiny bodies and looked as though he'd grown a big white furry coat before he fell and then was still. The kittens then just disappeared into like a white mist and blew away, and all that was left was a badly damaged corpse. Parts of it had been sickeningly stripped to the bone. Other parts were recognisable. I shuddered. Oof. What a way to go. Death by kittens of doom. Remind me not to piss off the devil. I turned to thank her. She'd helped me out once more and had done it in a beautiful way. May I please just ask one more favour? My respectful request was actually, well, it was really filled with respect because she'd really helped us. Is there any way you can get me out there? I asked. She smiled. What a smile. And nodded, took my hand, and simply stepped, pulling me outside through the circle. I turned to thank her, but as usual, she was gone. I turned to my left, and there was Fen, and we both did that smiley thing. What do you mean we both did that smiley thing? No, of course wolves can smile. But I don't know. They just do that turning up bit. They can't. What are we talking about, El? Anyway, the professor and the rogue genie had regrouped as the battle lulled with the death of the giants. I ran to join them as the wolf. We became the wolf and got ready to prepare for the final battle. Come on if you think you're hard enough. Yeah.
Brought to you in association with Grendel Press. This is Werewolf the Podcast, a serial killer drama.